Good day there, everyone, and welcome to my channel. Waiting for people to come on board, but happy Easter to everyone. Obviously, in Australia, it is Good Friday, so happy Good Friday to everyone. I hope you're safe and well. And to all those people around the globe, I hope you're all keeping well also. Today, we're going to be faceting the girdle, and when people come on board, we'll say a big hello to those people and we'll have some questions and answers. And today, hopefully, we will be talking also about faceting machines. So I'll just stand by for a moment, have a cup of tea and wait till people pop in. So I might get started. I'm faceting the girdle, and obviously no one has popped into the live chat, so we'll just wait a moment. But currently faceting a design called the Orbiter, and this is a design by an Australian faceter. I believe he is fully retired now, and he doesn't cut gems. So we got our first person in. How are you going, Aftab? How's things? Happy that you could join us. We're just starting. Welcome from Pakistan. Hope all is good with you in Pakistan. I'm starting to facet soon, and we're just waiting for more people to join us. And I'll be cutting the girdle on this amethyst today. So in Australia, it's Good Friday, Aftab. So happy Easter. Obviously, it starts with you guys tomorrow. Hey, Shannon, how are you going? Greetings from the US. I hope all is well with you in the US. Happy Easter for tomorrow. It's Easter in Australia already. It's Good Friday. And currently it's nearly 8 o'clock, 8 a.m. in the morning. So I guess in the US, you must be getting around, 6 or 7 o'clock in the evening, wherever you live. So I'm just waiting for a few more people to come on board, and then I'll start faceting, and we'll have a question and answer session today. Hello, SB Miller. How are you? Glad that you could join us. So while we've got 3 people on board, if anyone wants to ask some questions before I start cutting the girdle, and we're going to be talking about faceting girdles, and I won't get up to the polishing of the girdle, but that will be an important issue, polishing girdles. Would like also to discuss a little bit about faceting machines. So if you guys have any questions, just lay on a few questions and I'll try to answer those, and then I'll get started. Hopefully we get a few more people into the live stream. But for those people who are here now, thank you for joining in. Can everybody hear me okay? Oh, thanks, Shannon. Okay, look, I'll start faceting, and I'm working on a design called the Orbiter 10, and I mentioned this earlier in the stream when some of you guys hadn't already joined in. But Orbiter 10 is a design by an Australian faceter called George Beard, and he's no longer faceting. He's retired, but he's a well-known gem cutter in Australia. And you can actually pick this design up on a Facebook page called Victorian Faceters Group. So if you want to get hold of that design, you can. It's in a PDF form. So I'll just answer a question. How do you keep the sanding, the grinding discs clean? Well, I'll just answer the rest of the questions. Okay, so over here we have our cutting disc. This is a diamond, what they call diamond topper lap. It sits on top of a master lap. So underneath this lap here is an other solid metal lap, which is actually made of brass. These discs here, this is a 600, so when I've finished using it at the end of the day, basically all you do is take it off and just give it a bit of a light scrub with an old toothbrush or nail brush under warm water to remove any debris. Then obviously that will be put away and dried out, and then if you're using another disc the next day, I don't clean all my discs all after I've used them. So this disc here, after I finish using it, will go in the rack, and then I'll clean it after I've finished this fastening session later on in the day. With the 100 grit discs, you don't need to really clean them because they're just really a preforming disc to remove a lot of material. Hi Joshua, how are you going, mate? Greetings from Australia. Hope all's well with you. So in terms of cleaning discs, any disc that's from say 80 or 100 grit down even to a 240, I wouldn't bother cleaning any of those because the coarseness of the diamond is so rough. I mean, they're only designed for very quick grinding, so they're not likely to get contaminated. Really, it's really the finer grade discs you've got to worry about, and particularly polishing discs. For example, a tin lap or a copper lap, you just don't want to get any contamination embedded in those laps. But anything I think down to a 600 grit is fine, and then with the 600 grit, 1200 pre-polish and a 3000 pre-polished topper lap, yeah, you can give those a clean after your fastening session, just in warm water with a nail brush. Some people use a little bit of bicarb soda in warm water, but I just use a bit of warm water and then they dry out. I actually use a hairdryer to dry them out. Then they just go back in my rack. Okay, I'm going to start fastening. We haven't got a lot of people on board today, so I'll keep an eye on the time, how long we go. I don't think it'll be a 2-hour session because I'll just be working on the girdle. Now, hopefully when more people join later on, we'll be talking about the situation of fastening machines because of what is going on within the world at the moment, and people not having a lot of work. I really could not see the price of fastening machines remaining at the current market prices. That's something we might discuss later on, and that would apply to wherever you live, whether it's in the US or say if you live in Pakistan like AFTAB does, or if you live in Europe. I really, with the current situation, some of the prices on these machines that can go up to 10,000 plus US will significantly will definitely have to come down in price. Okay, I'm going to start fastening part of this girdle outline. I've already done a little bit, and I'll keep an eye on the questions, so hopefully we get more people in. If we don't get enough in at the moment in this session, I can always come back later in the afternoon. Okay, I'm going to start off now. I'm going to start off with a fairly moderate speed. Generally speaking, guys and girls, I really don't like running my lap at a high speed. So this here, I've just turned it on, is running at a fairly moderate speed. The only time I'll run it at a high speed when I need to remove lots of material. Once you've got down to the point where you've removed the bulk of the material off your gem, then you want to start slowing things down. Yeah, it's not a race to get the gem cut if you're a recreational fastener. It's all based on getting a good job done. If you're a commercial cutter, that's different. You'll be running this disc at real high speeds because the higher the speed, the quicker the material you're trying to grind away will occur at. Okay, so I should have done something before I did that. I should really check where I'm at with this facet. And I'm just going to lower it. Now, never start fastening unless you really know where you're at with your facet. So I've done that already. I'm on the right index. Just don't jump into cutting without, knowing exactly if your facet is touching the surface or not. And always make sure you have the right index. That is always one of the problems that we will always struggle as a faceter. Anyway, I'm going to start off and just lay some questions on me while I'm fastening, and I'll try to answer them. So just running a bit of water on a 600 grit disc at a very moderate speed. My intention is to start cutting a girdle outline today. And I've got a little bit of work to do on two facets in particular. One of the problems you find with a finer disc, particularly once you start getting to a 1200, 800 grit lap, you can't hear them as well as you normally should be able to. It's actually the coarser laps that you can really hear what's going on. So you have to pay special attention to listening. I think listening is a big deal when it comes to faceting. Now I'm just listening at the moment. So AFTAB says with some of the problems that gems scratch in packaging, how do you refresh the scratch surface? Well, a lot of gem dealers, they apply oil to the gem to make them look nice and shiny. You could use probably any type of oil, anything to, don't obviously not engine oil, but you could use a bit of cinnamon oil, wintergreen oil, even a little bit of olive oil. That'll sort of shine them up for you. It's not recommended that you do oil your gems because apparently it gets into the inclusions and doesn't help the gem out at all. Just answering Joshua's question as I'm faceting. Joshua says, and on that note, Cliff, do you note down what facet you're up to so that you can get the right degrees if you tend to leave and come back? Yeah, actually, yeah. What is always best? I do actually. So at the moment, I'm fastening the girdle. I've got to cut approximately about 9 facets on this girdle outline. So I've actually written notes. To my left, there's a bunch of notes with actual indexes, which are free and 90 free, which I'm cutting at the moment. And yes, I do leave notes. What is always best is to do a whole section. So, for example, if you're doing the pavilion, you do all your P1 facets. Make sure you try to complete each section before the next day, if that's possible. You don't want to be halfway through a tier. That's when people do start forgetting where they're at. So, for example, if you've got 8 facets on a P1, try to just cut those facets. It doesn't mean you're going to be able to polish them. Let's say you've started with a 600 or say a 240 grit disc and you've cut them. The next day you might need to go down to 600 grit. So you cut each section in order of disc also. I hope that made sense. So, for example, you cut 8 facets with a 240 and you haven't got enough time to move on to your 600 to smooth them out. So then you stop at your 240 grit disc and then the next day you go to your 600 grit disc, but complete the cycle of those 8 facets with each individual disc. Sometimes it may take, 2 or 3 hours just to get through a whole tier of facets. So your P1 facets may take 3 hours all up from the time you start cutting with a 240 to maybe a polish. At the moment, this is going really slow. There's 2 facets on this girdle that there's a lot of material that has to come off, and I'm almost thinking about changing a disc in the moment if this goes too slow, because I don't want to be here all day cutting these 2 facets. Actually, I'm going to migrate to a different disc because this is taking way too long. Now, these are one of the things you find out. I'm on a 600 grit disc, but sometimes you're just going to have to change things out, and because if it goes too slow. Now, you know, I've got a reverse fret on my machine. So most machines tend to have that. And when people get their fastening machines, they're trying to twist the other way around, and they wonder why they can't get their spindle off. It's because it's a reverse fret. So I'm going to just see what I've got here. I think I'll go to a 240. Now, what I've got here is a very rough 240 grit lap. When I say rough, it's a lot coarser than the 600, but it's an old one, so it's not going to be too aggressive. Well, I hope it's not. I've got a fair bit of material to remove off these two facets. Now, because this topper lap, what I've done, I've replaced it instead of the 600, but it's the same thickness as the 600. All I've got to do in this case is go back to my index, which I've just changed back to index 3. I'm going to just raise it up a bit because the grit is a bit coarser than the 600. But the good thing is I don't need to do anything else with this mask over here. I don't need to lift it up or down because the actual thickness of the disc is the same. And that is the benefit, because you can see over here I put down my 600. The benefit with having all the same thickness discs is that you can change them out like that. If one disc happens to be, say, 5 millimeters and another is 2 or 3 millimeters, all of a sudden you're going to have to change all this, the height of this here, up and down to accommodate. That's why I like the topper laps. They're pretty, they're all the same size and very consistent in terms of not having to mess around too much. So I'm just going to go down, and this should really start to speed up a bit more. Just look at what's going on. So I've got two facets, a 93 index and a number 3 index. Now I'll answer Aftab's question. Hope I pronounced your name correctly. So he has purchased 34 to 40 carat size water opals, and they make their rings after 3 months. Oh, okay. So I think hang on, I'll just stop for a minute. So he's bought 30 to 40 carats of, I think what he means, they're Wellow opals. And they're starting to crack after a certain time. Okay. What you're dealing with those opals, they're hydrophane opals. That means they're water absorbing opals. You need to put those opals in some water so they absorb the water. What happens with these hydrophanic opals, particularly from Wellow and with the fire opals that come from Madagascar, because they're water soluble, they dry out once there's no water in them, and then they start to crack. They're beautiful opals from Wellow, but they do have an inconsistency with being hydrophanic. The Australian opals, they absorb a little bit of water, but not much, not to the point where they dry out and start cracking or crazing. So the proper word is crazing, is when this opal starts to get all these little micro cracks. It's really a product, in my opinion. It's a beautiful product, but in my opinion, I don't think it should be sold at the prices it is, because it needs a lot of care. These Wellow opals, they need to really be stored in little plastic bags with a little bit of water in them. And I've even found with my fire opal, I've got fire opal that I've faceted, and even if you put them sometimes in a little plastic bag with a bit of cotton wool, just to keep it hydrated, after a while, even that starts to, somehow the water starts to dissipate out of that bag. And then if you haven't checked it for 3 or 4 months, that opal will dry out and it looks just absolutely horrible. So a couple more people have joined in. So hello, Popamono12. How are you going? Hope you're having a good day also. And Matt Jensen. Oh, hi, how are you going? What do you say? Oh, you cut amazing stones. Thank you. So we were just talking about these opals, the Wellow opals and fire opals in particular from Africa. They are hydrophane or hydrophanic water absorbing opals. If you're buying rough material to facet, be really careful. Those opals dry out. They need to be hydrated in some water. I made a video on faceting Wellow opal. If you go through my videos, you'll find it, and you'll notice a difference of the opal after it's been cut in when it's hydrated and when the water has leached out of it. Okay, I'm going to keep continuing with this girdle outline. I'm faceting the girdle of this amethyst, and then later on, when there's a few more people, hopefully we get a few more people on board, I really want to discuss probably the global issue with faceting machines and the price of faceting machines, and maybe the price of stones, because I would think in another 6 months, the way the situation is with people being out of work, including myself, is that there is no way that the current prices standing can exist unless the global economy picks up. And please join in on me on this conversation, because I've been feeling for a while, particularly in Australia, that the prices of faceting machines are a little bit overpriced. There is a demand for them, and I'll discuss that in a minute, why we have this demand, but I think that'll be short-lived. So I'll keep an eye on other people's. Hey, Andre, how are you going, mate? Glad that you could join me. Yeah, so AFTAB, those opals you've got, I would pop them in a bit of water, and you'll notice that within a half an hour to an hour, things will start to change dramatically. We get a lot of reports in our news from people that live or what's going on in the US. I hope everybody is safe at the moment, staying indoors. In Australia, we're all indoors, most of us. We've been pretty much ordered by the government to stay inside. If we go outside to a different state or different town, we can likely be fined $1,000 Australian, which is quite a bit of money. So they are very serious here in Australia with the current situation. But there's always a silver lining, because, I mean, there's so many people now doing live streams across the country and globally that we can all sort of catch up with a lot of our hobbies and interests. What time is it in the US for some of you people? Yeah, look, it's I can see. Yeah, Andre, it's one of those things that maybe going to work may depend on how old you are too, and maybe if you're a young person, it's probably okay to go out to work. But yeah, look, if you're in your 60s or maybe your late 50s or whatever, I'd be staying at home, to be honest. Yeah, so it's 5:21 p.m. Usually I start a bit later. I'm probably thinking maybe that most people have had their afternoon or their their late night tea by about 6:30, 7, so I probably should have started a bit later, but I was trying to accommodate for a few other people that couldn't make it in. Yeah, just answering Joshua's question. Yeah, we're going to be talking about the price of machines. I've got some sort of interesting subject matter. I really want to talk about some of the Australian machines, but I think this would be the same problem in the US. We have a real problem with just people manufacturing machines and getting them out to the general public. So there's a supply issue going on. But I think there's other issues because parts are being ordered from China and they can't get the parts from China, which suggests that they might need to start manufacturing the motors in Australia. Well, so you guys in the US things will start to slowly warm up there. So you'll be getting into some good weather. On one facet, it's barely even touching the disc, and on the other, it's still grinding away. And the thing is, when you're fastening even a girdle outline, for example, when I touch this, it's just barely touching. It's down a bit lower. I'm just going to recheck that. So that's lower. And I'll just go to the other side. Actually, sorry, that one's lower. So I just got to grind a bit more off that. I've just lowered my mast. So Andre says, I don't believe the gem prices will fall down on retailers, maybe on wholesale. Oh, look, a lot of retailers will be holding on to old stock that they bought at higher prices. They probably will not be willing to be selling their gems at too much of a discount, and that's a point. But what will happen, other retailers will be buying rough gems at the current market prices. They will jump on board and because obviously their prices will be undercutting anyone who's been selling the gems that they bought previously at a higher price. So it's going to make it very hard on some existing gem dealers. There's always going to be a new player who's going to be able to buy stuff cheap and undercut, particularly in a depressed market. For those people who have their job, it's going to be good times because the prices will definitely drop. For those people who don't have a job, well, no one's going to be buying. You kind of want a balance of both, really, but you don't, that people can still afford to buy stuff, but you don't want to be overcharged either. So Aftab says, in Pakistan, we purchased these machines for $1,500 US. Yep, and this is one of the issues. Everything is sort of pegged against the greenback, the US dollar. Now, for example, they're selling these machines, from Carvey, the Carvey company. I'll turn this off. They're selling machines in Carvey in India, and they're sold for $1,600 US. So by the time you do your conversion in Australian dollars, it's going to be over $3,300. But logically speaking, if it's that's where they do make the big money on the exchange rate. That I cannot see that working very well if you're trying to sell machines pegged against the US dollar. You'd think it'd be a lot smarter to actually sell that machine in your own currency and then have it converted to whatever international currency the person's buying the machine from. But I want to talk about fastening machines, and I'll just turn this water off for a moment. And then I'll continue fastening this girdle, which will take forever by the look of it. In Australia, and I hope our Australian manufacturers are watching this video, because you need to understand what is going on from a faceter's perspective, not a retail perspective. In Australia, we have three main suppliers of fastening machines, which is Gemmaster, Halls, and the VJ machines, and they're all good machines. There's no doubt about it. So in my opinion, they're surviving on tradition and on history, but because none of these manufacturers, all the original owners and the people who've set up these companies no longer exist. So they're taken over by different enterprises, which means they do not have a vested interest in these machines as the previous owners did, because the previous owners were people who were gem cutters or had a real interest in lapidary or gemstones in general. So everything was hinged on the fact that these machines were made out of love, if you like to use that word. And quite often when something is made because it's done for a purpose, not only to benefit the person who manufactured it, but to benefit those who buy it, then usually get high quality merchandise. However, I think this is probably very similar in the US and many other countries. There, a lot of these manufacturers are doing it really because it's about making money, but not about really importing quality and doing it for the customer. And some of the prices in Australia, I think if in good times they may be okay. I really think you're not going to sell any brand new machine for $5,000 Australian, which would be maybe a Gemmaster. So the current supplies of these machines are virtually non-existent. And this was in really good times. So 3 months ago, when our economy was going okay, they had problems. And the waiting times on some of these machines are more than 6 months. Actually, they're getting around to a year. So, for example, the Halls, people are waiting more than 9 months. And to be fair, no one has given them any money, so it's based on goodwill. But for someone to wait for 9 months to a year is really pretty ordinary, to be honest. And I hope Halls are listening to this, the guy there. It's nothing personal, but this is totally un-Australian where, okay, if you have a problem because there might be sickness in the family or you're having a problem getting in parts from China, well, just be open and upfront about, say, to the customer that have a back order, look, I've got problem with getting parts in, ordering certain, metals or whatever. Just be up and tell them that it could be a long wait, rather than stalwarting everyone and, telling people that, oh, yeah, it's in 4 weeks' time you'll have it. And then in 3 months' time you'll have it. No, sorry, you can't have it for another 6 months. And then it takes a year. Well, that's not on. And that's in great times. I mean, if really that it boils down to the fact that really it's bad business sense, and you probably need someone to manage your business if you can't get your product out quick enough. Probably maybe you need to employ a few apprentices. Who knows? But this is ridiculous. But this goes on and on with other fastening machines. Personally, I hope there are some young people, young engineers out there. You got a little bit of gumption. You got an interest in the hobby. Speak to a whole bunch of fasteners what type of machine should be made, because I do believe the current machines are very antiquated. We really need to lift our game. Joshua says Aftab says Australia's got good engineers. Yeah, we have some of the best engineers on the planet, but at the moment, what is going on is it's really horrible. In point of fact, it's appalling, and it's got to stop, because word is getting around on the forums about these long waits, and it really puts your industry in disrepute, because most fasteners, and I say it as it is, a lot of people are patient, but I read some of these things, and you're better off to have a bunch of people to say, no, we're not happy with the situation. I want a whole bunch of young guys to get out there, and when I say young, people probably up to 60, what is young, but a whole bunch of keen engineers who get together and say, we're going to start getting this thing sorted out. We're going to make a really top-notch machine, get them out to the public at an affordable price. I think that would be just wonderful. The machines in Australia, some of them are antiquated. I reckon they are. I mean, you have a look at the International Faceting Challenge. It's the Taiwanese are kicking everyone's butt with the new Dreamer. And if you have a look at the new Dreamer machine, which is astronomically expensive, no one can afford it. But what they've done, it's very simple. It's a very simple setup, very simple machine. It's got a mast. There's nothing complex about it. But such a machine could be easily manufactured for one-third of the price. And I'm going to just read out a question from Matt. Hello, Matt. How are you going? He owns a VJ fastening machine and a mast equivalent, Ultratech. Yeah. He likes the VJ better. It is solid, quick to adjust. Yeah, look, I think the VJ, the trouble is with the VJ, and I've said this in previous live streams, the majority of us own a mast. And to be honest, I've always had a mast machine. When I first started learning, I've used different mast machines. And to go over to a VJ where the plate comes up, it really is like trying to learn how to drive on the other side of the road. I do believe that the mast machine is more popular, and that is the type of machine that should be remanufactured in Australia. I know the VJ, it's a great machine, but VJ have been taken over by someone else, I believe the son-in-law, and I think there's a bit of a wait on those machines too. It's not like you can wait 2 or 3 weeks. There are months of waiting. And with the Gem Master, well, they say they're going to be releasing their machine in June, and to be honest, I think no one's going to be able to afford a $5,000 plus machine. I think it'll be a good machine, but it's based on the old Gem Master, the G4 series. I don't think there'll be a lot of changes in the machine. And they do need a few big changes on their faceting head. That swivel faceting head is just another level of complexity that, you don't need. What machines need is simple accuracy, and that's what the Dreamer does with the Taiwanese machine there. And I actually think the new Ultratech, that VL model, it looks very basic, but what they're probably dealing with, it's actually a little bit on the small side. And I think the VL is over $3,000 US. So once you buy that in Australia, it's an unaffordable machine, as good as it may be. So yeah, we in Australia, I hope these manufacturers of fastening machines are listening. You've got to lift your game, guys. It's not good enough. Simply just stalling people, and fobbing them off with telephone calls. You know who you are. It's not right. It's not an ethical thing to do, by the way, to say it as it is. If you're having supply issues with your fastening machine, be upfront, tell the people you've got an issue, and don't start fobbing them around and playing little games on the telephone. Personally, if it was me, I don't want to sound rude, but I might tell them where to go. Let's continue on with this. Now, other things. So I'm doing a girdle today, and we did discuss this the other day, that there are a lot of gems being sold with unpolished girdles. And we are not talking about, say, recreational fasteners. We're talking about commercial fasteners. I just recently went past a jeweler's shop a few weeks ago, and a sapphire worth over $4,000 set in a ring. So the ring didn't have a lot of gold in it, so it's not a lot of gold value in the ring. But the sapphire was a nice size sapphire. It was nearly 2.5, 3 carat from memory. Nice blue color, but the girdle wasn't polished, and because it was just set in a claw, it really looked ugly. to be honest. It was very obvious that the girdle wasn't polished. If you're going to be selling gems at $2,500, $3,000, $4,000, $5,000, you kind of expect, particularly on a sapphire, that you have a nice polished girdle outline. I really encourage anyone who's even a recreational faceter, try to get that girdle polished. There's too many excuses why the girdle is not polished. I can understand if you're fastening a very soft gem like opal or apatite, you may want to avoid it because it chips easily. But for most other gems, I mean, you're really not going to have an issue, I think, polishing a girdle. So Joshua said the halls are made in Cairns, and he is correct. It's made in Queensland. And currently they are having supply issues, which is a real shame because it is a great machine. Whether it is as good as it was 20 odd years ago, I have reservations. I think they're living on tradition, that company, and good history, but that's probably about it at the moment. Well, that's and Joshua mentions delivery of these machines. Well, you could pretty much expect that delivery in Australia will be non-existent. None of the couriers are operating. Australia Post has ground to a halt. All goods coming in from overseas are currently being put aside because of this coronavirus. So they've got to be put into storage. So nothing is, there's no contamination on stuff coming into the country. I answered, how do you price your gems once cut? Well, see, this is the thing. I'll tell you, I don't sell. Well, I've only really made gems for my friends, but the rule of thumb years ago was that Australian faceters tend to facet from around $25 to $30 a carat. Obviously, if you're faceting a small stone, you probably want to charge a lot more if you're cutting a sapphire, which is 1 carat or 2 carats. But if you're cutting a large stone, let's say 10 carat plus, you're probably looking at $27 to $30 a carat. I'm just filling up my water container. So I think that's probably the golden rule in Australia. So 10 carat stone, you probably, be looking around, $300 to cut that gem. It probably would take, if you're a commercial faceter, and a commercial faceter probably cut it in 10 hours, easy, really, a 10 carat stone, whether it was, some quartz, amethyst, whatever material. I would think the prices have gone up from, say, $27 to $30 a carat, more likely to be around $40 to $45 a carat. And then once you're dealing with sapphires, they'd be charging a different rate, probably based on weight more than charging per carat. But that, it used to be $27 to $30 a carat. I believe in Thailand, they're cutting for around about in between $4 to $10 a carat. So answering a few more questions. So Joshua, you're from Cairns. So if you were still there, you'd be helping him out. Oh, look, I don't know what the problem is with Halls. Maybe the guy is not well. I have no idea. I hope not. I hope he's in good health. But then at the end of the day, he's better off to tell if he is sick or is having health issues. Maybe it's better he just say to his customers, look, I'm pretty sick at the moment or whatever. I'm having supply issues. I had no idea they were using Chinese motors in their machines. And I just found out the other day on a forum that one of the issues with supply was that they couldn't get the Chinese motors in. Now, really, $3,500 machine using what, a $20 Chinese motor. They only got a year warranty on them. I can't see these motors lasting that long from China. And not only that, you know what it's like when you're buying anything that from China that's a motor, that you can't take anything apart. They're all factory sealed. It's not like you can unbolt them and fix them. It's you might as well throw them away. And then hopefully you can, you know, if they're a throwaway motor, hopefully they can be reordered. But that at the moment, that's not a guarantee. Anything coming from China is going to be quarantined. Oh, look, the horse company, I really hope things work out for him. I really think the guy needs to hire more people, get a couple young engineers on board, and just start producing more of them. The more they can produce, the cheaper they should become, you know, as like all things when you mass produce. But I really feel sorry for those people who've waited pretty much almost a year. You can use sewing machine motors in fastening machines. So, you know, the motor for a fastening machine does not need to be anything that special, but it needs to be pretty reliable. It needs to be running for at least 5 years. So if people are doing, say, an average of 1 or 2 hours fastening a day, you want to have a motor that's going to last at least 5 years. I mean, if a washing machine motor blew up every 6 months because you use it every day, people wouldn't be very happy. It's got to be something that's reliable. I really don't see the benefit of putting a cheap Chinese motor in a $3,000 plus machine, where really the motor is the most integral part of your machine. It's not going to go too well without a motor. Oh, what the type of motors they need to put in these machines are the ones that can be stripped down again and refurbished. So they can simply strip down, you put new bushes in them, things like that. So they get new brushes, bushes, whatever windings they need to replace. Nearly finished with these 2 facets. Has anyone been looking at the Dreamer machine from Taiwan? That's the machine that's been winning the International Faceting Challenge. One faceter got 3 gems with a 100-point stone. And that's pretty amazing to get. And they were assessed by Australian faceting judges. And they wouldn't have known whose gem it was, because no one knows whose gem is being submitted, because it's just a number on a gem. So they don't get to see the faceter's name. But the Taiwanese really did well in the International Faceting Challenge with the Dreamer machine, which is at pretty much dreaming prices. Like, it's an amazing price. I think well over 10,000 US from memory. So it's a pretty hefty price tag. But at the end of the day, it was accurate. It won the Fastening Challenge. And obviously the people who cut the gems were very good faceters. Hey, Luke, how you going, mate? But if a machine has an edge over another machine in accuracy, that machine will continue to win for a few more years to come. These international faceting challenges, it's just simple as that. And Australia used to do very well at these competitions because simply they had great machines years ago. I don't think they're as good as they used to be. But this machine here, it cut a stone in a recent jamboree, 98.5. So I was surprised that it could do it. And so when you start getting over 95 out of 100, you're pretty much you're cutting at a pretty high level. I think the Halls 2000 is one of probably the most accurate machines. That continually seems to win in competitions, but they don't make those anymore. There, look, that Dreamer machine, it looks like a very simple machine. They're really, from what I've seen from the photos, there's nothing complex about the machine at all. It's just the mast. Obviously, they've got the mast and the plate. The mast would be perfectly aligned, and the plate. But anything else, it looks very simple. Nothing to it. And I think that is the key. I think Australians need to start heading in that direction. The Gem Master with its swivel fastening head, and then the VJ with the rising plate, totally against, the current crop of machines. I really think they're going to have to just simplify things. One of the biggest problems also you find with a lot of the fastening machines globally is, for example, the new VL machine is such a tiny machine that if you wanted to cut a very large stone, you're never going to facet it because the mast height is way too low. And that goes for the Halls Extra. Too small machine to be dealing with very large stones. Now, whether people just consider those a machine for cutting competition stones or just the average stone between 6 or 12 to 15 mil. But if you wanted to cut a really large gem, I think you're going to really struggle. You just don't have the height masts. Not only that, the quill on the Halls Extra, too tiny. It's a sort, to me, it seems a little bit on the lightweight size, a little bit like the Ultratech VL. They've cut down the price, and the reason why these machines are cheaper is because they're a miniature size of what a proper size machine should be. So I think they're good for doing smaller stones, but yeah, if you want to go beyond that, I don't think they're designed for commercial facetters either, the Halls Extra and the Ultratech VL. I think they're only for the person that maybe cuts an odd gem every month or so. So if you're cutting, say, every couple of weeks, one gem, fair enough. But if you're commercial fastener and you're cutting anything up to 2, 3, 4 a day, as some can, you want something a little bit more robust. And if you're a recreational fastener and you like cutting, say, a couple of hours a day, like I do sometimes, then you kind of want something that can, cut for years solid. You don't want a tiny little pissy machine. But some of the early Halls, I think the Halls 2000, they were very robust machines. You probably cut for many years solid on those. Just looking at some of these questions. The Mark III, yeah, I think that'd be an awesome machine. Hey, does that have a 1/10 vernier on it, Luke? The Mark III, the old Halls, or not? By the look of it, no one's going to be buying the Dreamer machine. So what I'm doing now, I'm just listening to how the sound, I can just hear just a very light rubbing. So that means that both these facets are now cut to depth properly. It also means I'm going to have to cut a few other facets down to depth. So I'm using 240 grit disc, but it's a really old one. And it's done a pretty good job. I'll just have a bit of a drink. So it has a vernier of 1/4 degree increments. Okay, so that's not bad. So you're probably a little bit like me. You're going to have to work out roughly, when you're doing 1/100th of a degree, you're going to have to just, it's a guesstimate by the look of it. I'd imagine with the Halls 3, that would be a basic motor that if something went wrong with, you can take it to one of the small motor specialists where they just take it apart and they can just do up the bushes and things like that, just unbolt like mine. It shouldn't be a major issue with an old motor. So I've done index 3 and 29, so next index is 35 and 61, so I'll work on 35 first. Basically, this is going to be a question and answer session. For those people who live in the US, how is the production and output going on the Ultratechs and some of your other machines like the Facetrons? Are they getting those out to the public in a required amount of time? Okay, I'm just reading question. Yeah, so that's what I do, Luke. I just round it out to the nearest degree, and just sort of use pressure to cut to depth. Oh, yeah. One of the big issues they're having with the Halls is with the speed controls on them, particularly on the Halls 2000. If you've got an old Halls 2000, you're likely that the speed control will eventually go on it if it's still the old speed controller. They cost a lot to get refurbished too. I think you'd be looking at a minimum of $500 to $600 to get a new speed control. Gentleman in my fastening club, he the last time he used his Halls was at a workshop with the Victorian Fastening Group. He plugged it into the PowerPoint, and then all of a sudden there was a big waft of smoke, and the speed control unit blew up. Oh, yeah. So, you got the drop pulley system too, like me, Luke. Yeah. Pretty reliable system. It's a fail-safe system, isn't it, really? The great thing is too, if you could probably, with a drop pulley system, you could actually put different pulleys in them too, if you wanted to make it faster or even slower. Yeah, pretty reliable, the old drop pulley. So pretty much it's just, moderate and fast. That's about the two options. But look, the great thing with the drop pulley, and a lot of people don't realize this, because a lot of people haven't seen the drop pulley system on my machine, because it's sort of out of camera sight. But what it does, you always know the consistency of your speed. And that's one of the issues I had many years ago when I was learning. I was learning on a Drabish. And because it was a club machine, every time I got on the machine, someone would alter the speed setting. And each time you alter a speed setting when you're cutting a certain type of gem, you found it made it really hard to polish. Polishing is really driven on speed and touch and the amount of diamond you use. But when speed starts changing all the time on a machine, you really don't know where you're at. And that's a great thing with drop pulley system. You always know the speed and how to deal with that speed when polishing. I reckon it's great. But with a variable speed, I think a lot of people have to understand, if they've got a variable speed control, that they may need to only set it on a couple of settings, and that's the end of it, because you really can't afford to be running it at too many different speeds, because you're not going to know where you're at with polishing from one gem to another. I think that may be part of the key too. People always ask about polishing. They struggle with polishing. And maybe half the problem with their polishing is they keep changing up their speed and not understanding, how the polish works with the speed of the polishing disc, and applying the right amount of oil. I find years ago I used to put too much oil on my tin lap. These days I put far less on. When it gets too greasy, I struggle to get a good polish. So I'm going to go backpedal on a question about what Joshua asked about design. Should I do a video on fastening diagrams? I probably should one day. Look, some people are really good at understanding fastening diagrams. In my case, I understand them pretty well. And talking about refractive index, well, to me, that is the easiest thing in the world to understand. And I really do it the old school way. Years ago, I've still got a book, and I should show it in one of my videos. It gives you the refractive index of all the gems. I'll turn my machine off so you can hear properly. Each gem has a critical angle and a refractive index. And a lot of the old timers, and this is a very old book, it said that if you look at particularly with quartz, the refractive index is a little bit over 40 from memory, which I think is, the critical angle is a bit over 40.40, something like that. But you really would never want to cut that to that angle, particularly your culette facets. So in this book, it's a really old book, and all the old timers back in the 40s, 50s, 60s, they would always cut a lot higher the critical angle. I always do the same. So topaz is always over 42 degrees. Quartz tends to always be around 43.1 degrees, and then by the time you polish it, you're getting down to 43 degrees. I really do believe that a lot of the modern cutters are cutting way too shallow on the critical angle. Now, you can go through all the technical stuff with refractive index and critical angle. You can look at all the scientific stuff. But I would advise people that if you can get hold of one of these old books and have a look at the critical angles that the old guys used to cut to, I would be sticking to that. I don't get too bogged down in, look, refractive index 1.540 or whatever. If any gem is around 1.5 refractive index, I'm always going to cut to the critical angle of around 43 degrees. It's just that simple in life. Any low refractive index gem will be cut at a higher angle. Hey Dakota, how are you going? And I really don't think you should make it that complex. I look on these forums and people are looking at the scientific nature of refractive index and critical angles and all this, and they are making a mountain out of a molehill. I just stick to the basics. I think if you think, if you've got a refractive index of 1.8, which you're talking about a gem that has, for example, it'll be cubic zirconia, probably sapphire, zircons, then yeah, sure, you can cut the culette down to 41 degrees, but I wouldn't be going anywhere under 40. I mean, this to me just sounds like people getting bogged down in all this other stuff, and you don't need to. I was listening to a gentleman at a workshop, labradorite, and the critical angle, the refractive angle was pretty much self-explanatory, was 1.5 something, pretty low. And then he looked at the culette angle, which was over, the angle of the culette was over 42 degrees. And he thought, that wasn't quite right. But actually, it was right. I think the culette angle was around 43 degrees, to be honest. And that was perfect for labradorite if you're cutting around 43. I said to one of the guys there, one of the old timers, I said, he's getting too bogged down in the science of all this. I said, cut it at 43 degrees. That's the end of the story. Hey, Trevor, how are you going? But I should explain this. I don't get involved in all this scientific stuff, guys, to be honest. I cut gems because I enjoy cutting gems. I stick to the old time method of where people didn't cut below a critical angle, and that is pretty much the end of the story. Don't cut quartz below 42 degrees. It's very simple. Topaz, I don't cut below 41 degrees. Topaz, it doesn't matter what design you cut, don't cut the culet facets below 42. I like it around 42 with Topaz. In terms of the synthetic gems, gee, the sky's the limit. But once again, say cubic zirconia, I know you can cut down to 39 degrees, but I would stick to 41. It's not really, it's really not that complex. But people get bogged down, by they want to get the maximum amount of scintillation. And the only person that's ever going to see this stone is probably you or your wife or your girlfriend. No one's going to stop you on the street and go, gee, Joshua, you didn't meet the target with the critical angle. It's not scintillating in the way it should. And that's what it boils down to. The only people that are ever going to see the gem are you guys. If it ends up in a competition, I doubt that even the judges could even tell, that you might have cut slightly below the critical angle. They wouldn't know. Zircon and Peridot. This is a question from Dakota Stones. Are they a good stone for beginners? I would say zircon, yes. Very good stone. If anyone's ever faceted zircon, it is very easy to polish. It is, in my opinion, better than sapphire. Sapphire, you're dealing with what they call orange peel, where you get this type of little bubbly crazing on the surface, and it tends to happen on certain facets. And sapphire also, for some reason, it's harder on one facet than another. So you're just cutting down to depth, and all of a sudden you're overcutting because on a certain part of that gem, it seems to be softer. Zircon I've found to be a lot more stable. Peridot, I've faceted Peridot quite a few times now. Really easy to polish, but you need to be careful because it is like butter to cut. It's so soft. It is really a soft gem. I don't mind it because it's soft. It feels a little bit like topaz, a nice soft feel on the lap, grinds easy. But if you're a beginner and you've got a very small piece of peridot, as you would have, it's not likely you'll be fastening anything bigger than 3 to 4 carat. So you're dealing with a fairly small gem. Then you'll lose half of that in carat just by cutting. Well, probably it'll end up being 1.5 carat gem. A beginner will overcut all the time on a soft gem. So I would say zircon is a better one for a beginner. I always reckon people should learn on topaz. It's the best gem to learn on, the easiest to polish too, by the way. I'm having a cup of tea here, guys, so I find that with so much talking, my mouth gets dry and it gets really hard to pronounce a few words once that happens. Okay, I'm going to continue with this girdle. Hopefully I explained that question to Dakota. Yep, zircon. Zircon is one of the most underrated gems I've ever come across. I've got quite a bit of Australian zircon and zircon from Africa. I haven't even cut it yet. It's not huge stuff. Most of it's around the 3 to 4, 5 carat, but they're all going to cut nice 2 to 3 carat stones, a lot of them. And it is just one of the nicest gems in terms of scintillation. You don't need to worry about critical angles too much. You can cut around 41 degrees and even a bit lower if you don't have enough material to facet. It polishes really well. I polish zircon easy, even on Perspex, with a bit of diamond paste. You can buy the cheapest diamond paste on the market, THK or anything, if you can get it now, out of China, or even just cheap diamond paste you get from your lapidary suppliers. Zircon polishes virtually on anything. So does topaz. I'll just keep working on this. It's really hard to get with peridot. I found, obviously, you will pay a lot for anything that's over 6-7 carat in the rough with peridot. But if you've got a 4-carat stone, that'll cut usually a nice 2.5 carat gem, 2 to 2.5 carat. I find it's pretty rare, but you can get pretty much 60 to 70% recovery on most gems. Mine's sort of around, my recovery rate, I reckon it's not that great, to be honest. But when you hear some of these people, they're getting recovery rates on rough gems of over 65%. I think you've got to be extremely lucky, or you're cutting a very shallow gem to do that. Luke asked me what design I'm cutting. I'm cutting an Orbiter 10 by George Baird. And if you go to the Victorian Fastening Group website, you can download the PDF of that design. It's a open design, so most of us, you can download that and check it out if you like. Got a fair bit of material to remove, but I'm in no hurry at the moment. What I'm really trying to do is just cut down to depth on all my girdle facets. I'm just listening at the moment. I'm just checking the depth on a few of my initial facets. Once you've got a couple of facets right, particularly on any design, you've cut down to the required depth on the girdle outline. That's when you, with this height adjuster over here, you've got to kind of leave it as it is. You don't want to be lifting it up or down at all, because once you've got 1 or 2 accurate facets that are accurate and cut down the depth, and you've got to cut the remaining facets around it, if you start lowering that height adjuster, your girdle will start the staircase. So at this point, I'm just cutting down to depth, and I'm listening till the surface of the gem is virtually no longer touching the surface area of the disc. But I do need to be careful while I'm talking, because I do need to concentrate, make sure I don't hit the wrong facet. Hey Caleb, how you going? So I'm just reading. So Dakota. So you bought a lot of peridot, is that right? I've missed a few questions here. I'll just scroll up a bit. Yeah, look, if anyone, 70% recovery, I don't believe people can get that. I really think they'd be cutting a very shallow stone, Joshua. But you hear this all the time, people getting between 65 or 70% recovery. You see it often on YouTube too, people getting that type of recovery rate. To me, I'm happy if I can get over anywhere between 50 and 60 sometimes, because at the end of the day, you always come across some issue, like a little flaw or an inclusion. Sometimes you do an overcut, which means you lose more material if you're unlucky. Yeah, so going back to Dakota, we're talking about this girdle, peridot. Well, good luck with your Peridot if you've just ordered it and it's come from overseas. I think you're going to have a really long wait if it's been coming from China or India. See, if you can get it in a month, you're doing okay. Yeah, so go back to this girdle that with the staircasing. Most of the time, if you're a beginner, staircasing is a big issue, and you're kind of wondering what's causing this, and it's usually caused by lowering your mast. And what happens also, most fastening machines have a low point. So mine tends to be, I think, around the 24th index. If you can understand where your low point is on your index wheel, every other facet from, for example, if I'm cutting, happens to be my low point here, which is on index, for example, index 35. If that is the lowest facet and I've cut down to depth, you need to have all the other surrounding facets around it have to line up to that one low facet, the lowest point on that girdle outline, if that makes sense, because that is the lowest point. So you're going to have to use pressure on some of the other facets to cut down to that depth. So most fastening heads or quills have a bit of flex in them. So you're going to have to just use touch and pressure, but don't go lowering this. That's going to be something you want to avoid, touching your height adjuster. Got some really odd indexes. Index 61. So particularly with indexes you rarely use, like index 61 on your 96 wheel is an odd index number. You really need to watch out that you choose the correct index. I'll tell you what, you could be fastening for 10 years and it wouldn't matter how good you are. Clicking on the wrong index number, slotting that in is one of the worst things I think that can happen, particularly when you've got to the end of the gem and you're doing, so your star facets. Oh, gee. How many times can that happen? If anyone would like to support my channel and become a Patreon, there is a link in the top. Those people who are currently my Patreons, and they're not giving a lot of money. I think $5 a month, $10 a month. I'm actually giving those people special tuition videos, so they get posted out private links. Also, they have access to diagrams, and soon we'll be doing some Skype conversations. If hopefully that we can organize some conversations. If people are having trouble learning, we can organize a few tuition videos. But at the moment, they're getting tuition videos that are no longer, well, I'm not posting those on YouTube. So I just did a polishing tuition. So if anyone's interested in wanting to support my channel, that would be really good. But if you can't afford it, and I know a lot of people can't, don't worry either. I mean, I enjoy doing these live streams and posting my videos. The main reason I did it because it was a lot of fun. Certainly no money to be made out of YouTube videos, I can tell you that. And I guess anyone who facets gemstones, you know that if you're faceting from a recreational point of view as a hobby, there's no money to be made out of that either. So, yeah, so thanks, Joshua. Somewhat, I know a lot of you people can't afford it, and in better times, hopefully more people would want to become a Patreon. One of the reasons I'm doing these live streams, because I know a lot of you guys are at home. I'm at home doing nothing. I might be at home for the next month or two by the look of it. And so it's a good time for people to connect. You can ask questions, and hopefully you'll learn something out of these live streams also. Unfortunately, my webcam is not too good. I've got an older style webcam, but I think it's not much of a chance of getting a better webcam because all these webcams come out of China, and far and few between these days. So I'll just have a little break for a moment. I'm going to answer some questions. If anyone wants to ask me some questions, that's what I'm here for. I'll have a sip of tea and then I'll continue on. Now, I've already completed 2 of my girdle facets. There is 6 of them are my main priority that I've got to get done. And then I'll do the corner facets. So I'll go really quick, really concentrating on cutting down to depth. Hey, Bob, how you going, mate? How's things going in Florida? Hope all is well with those people that live in the US. We are doing a lot better in Australia with the current situation. So that's good. Florida's always hot, isn't it, Bob? By the sound of it. Miami and all those places. It always seems to be a bit like northern Queensland, perpetually warm. No, Luke, I have no. I've had no experience on phenolic laps. And to be quite honest, we talked a little bit about this on the last live stream. I'm trying to encourage people to whittle down and save money on a lot of these laps that, in my opinion, are useless. You really want to keep the costs down. I know a lot of you guys are not wealthy. I'm not. And the fastening industry are coming up with so many different laps. Every month, there's something new on the market. I would suggest, I know nothing about these phenolic laps, but we're talking, I think they're ceramic based from memory. But every couple of months, there's something new on the market. There's a new diamond paste. There's a new lap. There's always something going on. And perpetually people keep buying this stuff. And I've done it once or twice myself, but I learnt my lesson with the lightning lap. They're all gimmicks. A lot of this stuff's gimmick. Traditionally, people would stick with their copper and tin laps. Perspex has been around for a long time. And they then stick to what traditionally are good polishing mediums, and that has always been typically diamond or cerium oxide or aluminium oxide. A lot of people have used that in the past. I tend to only stick to the diamond these days, which is really good because I found the cerium to be a bit messier, but the cerium is easier to use too. It's easy to get hold of, cerium oxide. But you see all these, there's so many different type of polishing compounds you can get in different sticks. You get zirconium oxide, you can get diamond sprays. And at the end of the day, it's just adding more and more to what you kind of don't need. And if I can use an analogy, it's a little bit like a tackle box. Like most fishermen have got this big tackle box, and they've got all different hooks, all different fishing lines, all different sinkers. 99% of them don't use all the stuff in the tackle box. They usually stick to the 1 or 2 hooks they use and the same gauge fishing line and the same size sinkers when they're river fishing. And to draw out the same analogy, all this other stuff that's available, you're never going to use, to be quite frank. Save yourself the money. I'm going to just top up in case I start fastening again. Always good idea to keep an eye on your water levels. If your water levels drop when you're faceting, you end up getting scratched stones. So I just see if there are any more questions. Oh, well, look, if that whatever discs come with the machine, give them a go and try them out. A lot of secondhand machines come with a lot of usually copper discs. Someone asked me the question because they bought a machine with copper discs. Because you don't know what type of medium they used on the copper disc, whether it was an 8,000 or a 50,000 diamond, you're probably best, in my opinion, to go down to your local machinist, get all those old copper discs remachined, My local machinist just down the road, he only charges $20. Some of them charge up to $70 or more Australian, 70 to 80, which is a bit of a joke because it takes them only 5 minutes. But if you go to a machinist and shop around and you can get them done for $20 or $30 a disc, I would advise any old copper disc, any old tin disc, get the whole lot machined if you've bought a machine, and then you know exactly what type of polishing mediums will be used on it. One of my subscribers, really nice guy, he's got a bat lap, and on one side he uses a 50, or sometimes they call it a 60,000 60K compound, so 60,000 diamond grit, which is virtually the same as a 50,000. On the other side of his bat lap he uses 8,000, and I've talked about this on videos, is that try to avoid doing that using both sides of a polishing disc. The reason being is that once you've dropped on an 8,000 on one side of the disc, and I'll grab this for example, imagine that's your polishing disc, which has got a bit of rust on the back, but that's your polishing disc. You've dropped a 50,000 on here, you know, and that's your 50,000 side, and then on the flip side you've been using 8,000. Well, that side where you use the 8,000 compound is on the surface of your master lap. So that's dropping down on your master lap. If you haven't cleaned that properly, then you're going to get contaminants on the surface area of master lap, which means at the time you flip over and you decided, you know, this is your 50,000 side, well, that side is touching the surface area of your master lap, and you could, particularly on soft type of metals like tin, you could get contamination just from your master lap if it's not clean. I would avoid that. You don't flip discs. It's not worth it. You've got a tin lap that's probably over $100, and once you get 8,000 diamond grit into the 50,000 side of that disc, you're going to have scratching forever and a day. And the only thing you can do is really take it down to your machinist and get it re-machined. Yeah, so don't go flipping your laps. So with these bat laps, I think they're over $150 Australian, probably more. Or the horse Richter lap. So you got the horse Richter. They're solid laps. I would not advise you use both sides. What I'd be doing with a really high quality lap, I would only specifically keep it for, say, for example, a 50,000 diamond compound. At some point, it's almost inevitable on a tin lap, and some of these laps, even if they're a bat lap, eventually they'll start to dip out a little bit just from use. Or sometimes you might get accidental, you know, a little dent in it. You damaged it, accidental damaging. Then you flip it over and use the other side for 50,000. And then if both sides end up damaged or a bit worn, then you take the whole disc to your machinist, get both sides milled again. Because at some point, even with my tin lap, once you've been, you know, polishing for a year or two, I'm going to have to take it to my local machinist, get it flat out, get it all nicely re-milled. Yeah, so any old lap you get with a machine, make sure you understand what type of polishing medium you start off with. You don't want to be dealing with someone's old lap, particularly if it's just a pre-polished lap, and try to start polishing on it. Anyway, I'll get back to this for a moment, and I'll keep an eye on the questions. With the polishing or pre-polish laps, particularly the copper ones, it's really interesting. Like, copper is considered to be a really old school lap, but I have noticed, because my experience is that I haven't used a lot of copper except in the last 3 or 4 months, and finding that they are really a really good, effective pre-polish lap. And I used to look at my mentor, and he's an older guy in his late 60s. And for many years, I used to sort of, poke fun at the fact that he always used this old copper lap for polishing, and it was a solid lap. And he was always polishing, even quartz on it, and quite up to a pretty high standard. And that was with just diamond paste. And then last year, he won in the division for the 7mm sapphire in the Jamboree. He actually got, I think, 99.5. He polished that sapphire on an old copper lap, which really started to make me think about copper, because I always used to say to Peter, I said, "Oh, Peter, you've got to start using a tin lap one day, or at least try something different." But he always used this copper lap. And it goes to show you that the copper lap, even though it's not in favor because of all these new laps that are available, like the lightning laps and the phenolic laps, and there's a few different type of laps around, the new age laps, that the copper lap has been left sitting in the dust pile, not being used by a lot of facetors. But in my opinion, it looks like it's an absolute world beater, the old copper lap. So I've found that with the pre-polish to be a pretty amazing lap, the one I've got, and mine is only a bonded copper lap. But I think if I can get the chance, if some other laps came around one day, I would certainly give them a go. So yeah, look, it goes back to some of the required stuff you need in your tackle box if you were a fisherman, and I think the copper lap would be almost a required lap for pre-polishing. Actually, I might go back to 35 index. Now, if the 35 is done, I can hear it's just barely touching, so I don't need to do that. It's actually 61 index that I need to work on. Oh, no, it's going to be another index, maybe 67. So Josh was saying that the copper with the diamonds is pretty good. Yeah, look, I think I'd be sticking with that copper. It's funny about what you're talking about kneading in the copper with a ball. Now, I don't know. Look, I don't do that. My teacher, and that's a guy I mentioned who just won last year in the sapphire division, the 7mm one. His copper lap is totally smooth, so there's no annealing going on. But there is a lot of talk about should you anneal your laps or not. I don't. My tin lap, I don't do anything with it. It's just totally smooth. I like it best when it's at its peak, when it's just been milled, and it's smooth as a baby's butt. And that goes with the cerium laps with the Perspex. I like it when they haven't been scoured, so just nice and smooth. Once they start getting real scratched up, then I'd like to get a new one. The price of Perspex laps is only about $14 or $15, so they do last a fair while. So you don't go through a lot of them. Using a 240 grit lap, using a little bit of pressure, because I've got a bit of material I need to grind away. Hey Tam, how you going? You are late. Glad you could join us. So just to give anyone new a bit of a rundown, what I'm doing, I'm faceting the girdle on the Orbiter 10 design. We can all get hold of this from the Victorian Fastening Group website. It's a really nice design. Not that easy, by the way. So if you're a beginner, I would stick with something a bit easier. So some of the conversations for new people, we were talking about the price of fastening machines earlier on. I think with the current global crisis, I'd say the price of secondhand machines and new machines will have to start dropping within 6 months. So there's no way they're going to be selling them at the prices they are. We also discussed the fact that in Australia, that production or output of fastening machines is absolutely appalling. And I'm hoping that some of these people listen to this live stream, because your output and the way customers have been put on hold to buy these machines is just not good enough for any business to do. So that's a little bit of what's happening. So if you missed most of this video, you can also watch it later on. Okay, I'll answer a few questions. What compounds can you use on Perspex? You can use cerium oxide, tin oxide. You can use the Lind A, which is I believe that's an aluminium oxide. I don't know why people would want to use Lind A. It's very effective on, I believe, garnets and a whole host of other gems. But by golly, it's become very expensive. I mean, just for a little bit of it in Australia, very popular product in the 70s and 80s, but it seems to be very expensive. I use diamond paste. You can use pretty much any commercial diamond paste that you buy off eBay, the ones that come in the syringes. I usually find the 2.5 to 3.5 micron pretty good on Perspex, and that works really well with topaz, zircon, not so good on quartz. So I would avoid quartz with any of those diamond pastes on Perspex. What else can I say? Yeah, so Perspex mainly you would use cerium. So cerium for quartz and diamond paste for topaz and zircon and garnet. I've had really good, I think with topaz, you could pretty much polish it on anything. Yep, I've ordered some discs from China. Like a few weeks ago, thank you for those people who donated some money, because I really needed to buy some pre-polished discs, and so I'm just using some old ones I've got at the moment. That could take months. Good luck, Josh, getting your discs from China, because I reckon it could take ages. They're all going to be put into quarantine, those discs, for a minimum of 2 weeks. Once they hit our customs, nothing's coming out of quarantine. So those people, for example, if you're in Australia, and even Tam, we do have a really good fastening competitions in this country. I think we have some of the best fastening competitions globally. We host probably more than any other country. We have really credible judges. Each one of the judges has to go through an extensive course. You have to win so many competitions at a certain level before you can even become a judge, from what I've heard from my mentor. And then you've got to do the courses. It's a fair bit of time involved in becoming a good judge. And I would really encourage anyone who's a recreational faceter, if you want to see how you're progressing and get good commentary from the judges, because each one of the gems you have entered into a competition gets scrutinized, you'll get a good idea of how you can improve. one of the things one of the things I'll be asking some of the judges, whether they can, when they're writing out the comments, could they please make it a little bit more legible? I've found some of the comments it's almost like hieroglyphics. I can't read what they've written because the handwriting hasn't been that great. So make sure that, when you submit it, just put a little comment in that. Could the judge please make sure that you can read the comments? But look, you'll get a lot of information and feedback from your scores. It's not about winning. If you win, that's a bonus, I reckon. But you'll understand where you're going wrong. I always used to have an issue with ghost facets. I kind of knew it. And then you learn how to deal with it. A lot of people have, one of the biggest issues people have is staircasing, and I almost guarantee you staircasing, this is something we mentioned earlier on, Tam, because you're late. Staircasing usually occurs because of your height adjuster, not so much inaccuracy of your machine. That's something we also discuss. Most machines have a low point on the index wheel somewhere. A lot of machines tend to be on the 48 index in Australia on the Gem Masters, which is interesting. So if you understand the low point on your index wheel and understand that you don't want to mess around with your height adjuster once you've cut down to depth, those two things will be very critical in how accurate your gem is. So what I'm doing at the moment, I've cut down the depth virtually on this facet, but I'm just listening because it's not moving around. So that means there's not a lot of drag on my disc. But I'm just going to check out my other facet, which is 35. Now that one is just touching lighter than the 29. So I'm not happy with that because there's a little bit more drag on the 29th index. Okay, so that has to come down more. And so what I'm doing now, I'm just using pressure. I'm not touching my height adjuster. It's actually zeroed in virtually on 0. My height adjuster has little markings on it from 0 to 10. And each increment is exactly 1/10 of a millimeter. So I can actually adjust to pretty low tolerances on that height adjuster. But I don't look at it. I don't look at any of the numerals on my height adjuster. Does anyone else's height adjusters have numerals on it? So you understand that one rotation is going to be 1 millimeter of depth. So when you do a full rotation on your height adjuster, most machines, I think you're lowering down by 1 mil. What club are you in, Joshua? No, I haven't heard of Mel. So now I've got a lot less drag on this facet. Hi, Ian. How are you going? Look, who could I recommend? This is a question I get asked. Oh, can you cut a gem for me? If you have a specific gem you want to have faceted, I would suggest, depending what country you live in, I would be going down to the local gem club and ask one of the faceters here if they can do it. If you can't get someone to cut it for you, maybe a good idea is to join the club and learn how to cut it yourself. I think Doug Menahue in Australia facets gems, but a lot of these gem cutters in Australia only want to facet their own rough, and that's fair enough because you give them a nice sapphire or a nice gem and they mess it up, well, they have to wear the burden of making a mistake on your rough material that you have. Okay, so Gold Coast Lap Club. Never heard of Mel, Joshua. Okay, so Tam asks a question. The tin lap I got with my machine is heavily scored. How do I fix that? I would suggest you take it to a local engineering shop, ask them to put that on their lathe and get it milled. So it's got to be just ground flat. I would suggest, and tell them if it's tin, because it's going to be soft, but it's not going to be as hard as copper. They really need to be careful when milling it. The local guy who did mine, he kind of knew that it was soft, and he said they couldn't run the machine at the speed they normally would, so they've got to be careful with soft laps. But I can only suggest that is probably the best thing you can do, and try to shop around. Excuse me. Try to shop around. Different engineering shops charge a lot more than others. Try to get a quote. The local guy down the road charges $20, but I kind of know him. But most tend to charge in Australia $60, $70, $80. I think is a little bit rich. That's way too much money. But 30 or 40 maybe is fine. Doesn't take them long. It's literally 5 minutes work once I got it on the lathe, just to mill it. No, look, Ian, I don't facet for anyone. I don't, except for friends. I really don't want to be taking a risk. Someone sends us a gem that could be worth a bit of money. I make a mistake, or sometimes people send, they've got a gem, but it's heavily included and the thing just cracks apart, as it can do with a heavily included gem. Pieces start just peeling off. I really don't want to be dealing with that type of thing from other people. It's just too much stress. That's why I always try to encourage people, if you've got your own rough material, then start learning how to facet them yourself at a gem club. Most gem clubs only charge $25 a year. In Australia, they do. And you can go twice a week, midweek or on a weekend, and have access to a faceting machine. And you can spend 3 hours or more for each session and learn how to facet. So always someone in a faceting club who will show you how to facet, because a lot of the old guys they've been faceting for years, but quite often they don't facet anymore. They're more interested in cabbing, so they'll get you started on one of their machines. So look, what Joshua said is true. You can send. This is the thing. I'm going to stop my machine because I really want to talk about this with you guys. When it comes to sending stuff overseas for faceting, a lot of people send their 40 carat topaz to these overseas faceters in Thailand. So 40 carat topaz is a good, nice sized gem. Sometimes they can be a 200 carat topaz. And then when it arrives back home, that 40 carat topaz, if you lost half the carat weight, you kind of understand it's going to be maybe a 15 carat or 20 carat tops. That's understandable. But then they end up with a tiny little 4 carat stone with a little note attached to it saying, sorry, the topaz was heavily included. We couldn't do much with it. Unfortunately, you've got your 4 or 5 carat standard round brilliant. But what they've really done is giving you, they've had a piece of topaz, or they've cut half, or they've dissected that huge piece of topaz and sent you a small piece back. You really got to find reputable gem cutters. There are shonky people around who will take your large gem and they will send you a very small gem back in its place and tell you that it had all sorts of issues, cleavage issues, inclusions, cracks, when simply not the truth. For those people who've seen, I shouldn't laugh, but It does happen. It's really one of the things. There are a few shonky gem cutters out there. I think in Australia, most of them are very, very legit. Hi, Laurelie, how you going? Yeah, we're all pretty. Most of us are pretty honest. But I think once you start sending them overseas, just be a little bit wary. Don't go sending your 200 carat zircon or topaz off to them. And certainly, if you've got a really nice sapphire, you know, a 7, 8, 9 carat sapphire or even bigger, you really want to be sending it off to a reputable gem cutter. Hey, John, how you going? Another late person, welcome to the live stream. We're talking about sending stuff overseas. Just be careful that, you know, you don't come, they don't send you back a 1 or 2 carat gem when it was a very large rough piece in the first place. So just quick update for the new people like Laurelie. You can catch up with the live stream later on. You'll see we've been talking about all different types of things. I'm fastening the Orbiter 10, which is a sort of a triangular sort of a gem, and it's designed by George Beard, an Australian designer. It's actually a competition gem. Not sure whether I will dedicate this to a competition, because the last thing you kind of want to be doing when you're fastening for competitions is doing live streams at the same time. Mistakes can happen. But a rundown, we were talking about fastening machines, the prices of fastening machines, John. I would suspect will be dropping big time within the next 6 months because of the current world economic situation. Unless the whole planet goes back into a recovery quickly, I really would think that prices would substantially have to drop. I could not see the current prices of rough material staying at the price it is. Only old stock will be sold at current prices, so those gem dealers can recoup, you know, the money they paid for it. So there's some of the topics we've been talking. If you look at the earlier part of my video, we're talking about the output of Australian fastening machines, how it's almost come to a grinding halt when it comes to ordering one. And that goes down to fewer suppliers, one supplier in general, which is Halls. And whatever the problem is, whether the man is sick or I think it's a supply issue generally, because he just can't get parts from China, which I find unfathomable that they do use Chinese parts in Australian fastening machines. Why? The things are worth $3 or $4 grand each. Surely they can afford a half decent motor in them. So we've been talking about all those things. And I thought that would be one of the issues I would discuss, fastening machines. I think they've always been a bit on the pricey side, and encourage new people to start designing better machines. It's really all based on output. The more output you can get and quality output in building these machines, so they've got to be still built at a good level, then the prices will start to drop. But the situation in Australia is pretty darn awful. People are left flat-footed waiting on orders that are a year old, and that's unacceptable. But having said that, these people have not put a down payment down. But personally, I wouldn't want to be fobbed around, and the whole stalling process these people have been put through is horrible. So that's basically the rundown we've talked about. So we'll get back to some of these questions. And I'm still working on this girdle on and off. I'll just have a sip of tea. Oh, what? So how long did it start to finish? The Diamond of Solomon. Well, actually, that was a design. That was the real design is called the Zebra's Eye, and it was a huge gem. And I think from memory, that took me 8 weeks off and on, 6 to 8 weeks. It really took ages to polish. It had huge facets. I have to admit, with these larger gems, I really don't cut gems as large, even though this one's going to be a good sized gem. But when it comes to those huge gems, I really wanted to do some big gems to test out my machine, and it is fun to occasionally cut a really large gem, but the time it takes months, and that's literally fastening at 2 hours a day. So when you're building up all that time, you're probably fastening around 25 hours a week for a month or two. It's a lot of hours that gets put into cutting a gem. And admittedly, I'm not a commercial faceter, so I'd probably cut a bit slower than most commercial faceters. But that is really something I don't do often anymore, cutting gems that have a diameter of more than 15 mil. I cut recently a gem for a friend of mine. It was a large citrine, but it was for a friend, and it measured around 18 millimeters, and it just took weeks to get done with a lot of hours. So that gives you an idea of the timeline, particularly with the large gems that are over 15 millimeters. That's why you're paying big bucks for certain gems that are large, simply because the time it takes. Now, like, I know with commercial faceters, they can do it in 1/4 of the time, but you're dealing with a gem that's probably got really bad meat points, really bad polish, probably cut at a very shallow angle, so it's not going to scintillate to the same proportions that I would cut a gem to. It's not going to have the same output in scintillation, and the care taken in faceting that gem won't be at the same level. And all of these people who are on my live stream, most of you guys facet or you buy gems, all of you, I can guarantee, will be cutting at a higher level. Most of you will be cutting at a higher level than the commercial cutters in Thailand or India or China. I can guarantee you that. I've seen some of the work from Tam and John, and looks really good to me, to be quite honest. Looks better quality than I see in the jewelers in Australia with the imperfect girdle outlines and unpolished girdles and things like that. So all you guys are doing a great job. It's good actually to see some of the photos people send me on emails. And I had a recent photo, which I'm really glad this guy sent to me. Martin was his name. He sent me a photo of the Cleopatra's Eye. I sent him the design with some of the corrected angles, and he said to me, "Oh, look, it's not competition grade." He's a relatively new cutter. He's been fastening for a year or two, but he said he was really happy with the outcome. And I saw the photo, and I was really impressed with what he did, more so because that was another person that managed to facet that gem. So I'm glad he got that done, and really happy for him, because now he's in possession of a really great design. I thought he did a really great job too. So he's in possession of a really great gem design that very few people could get hold of except someone who facets. Have you ever cut a stone that is not symmetrical, like more of a freestyle? Ian, yes, I have. I've actually won a competition last year on a freeform gem. I actually, when I started working out how freeform, well, the sides of a freeform, you're cutting to the shape of the stone. When you've got competition gems, it's kind of, you're dealing with a specific, well, it is a freeform design, but you're working to a plan, to a design. And I have to admit that freeforms, if you can understand how to cut a freeform, it is really probably one of the easiest gems to facet. You could literally put it on your dop, so you can stick it on your dop and just work out the angles just by touching it. And if you're very proficient with Gem Cut Studio, anyone within a year or two should be able to facet a freeform with a brilliant facet pavilion with which would include barium facets and then you've got your other surrounding brilliant facets. So yeah, I think freeforms I have done. I've got quite a few gems, nice zircons that are odd shapes, and I want to facet those to a freeform. The downside with freeform faceting is that they would be almost impossible for an average person to get them set they have to have specialized settings made up for them, and that won't be very cheap. And when you see on forums all these people cutting these freeform designs, and then someone buys those gems of them, I hope they realize that there's not a setting available on the planet that would suit it. They're going to have to be made up by a jeweler, and that will be quite a bit of a cost incursion on those people. But freeforms, I really want to encourage those who've been fastening for a few years, have a go at doing freeform designs. You may get a gem that requires a freeform type of cut, particularly if you've got an expensive piece of rough like a sapphire. You may well have to freeform cut it. Okay, I'll just look at some of the other questions. So what size or carat weight do you find that is in the medium? Not too big or not too small, I guess, is what he's asking. To answer that question, I find a gem, this is my opinion, I find the perfect size of a gem to be between 8 to 10 millimeters. Maybe 7 to 10. 6 is a nice size for a ring, but for pendant, 8 to 10. I really do like cutting gems in 8 to 10 millimeters. Once it starts getting over 10 millimeters, 10 to 15 millimeters, as this gem will be, then it's just extra time. And like I think a lot of gem cutters, once you get bogged down into cutting a gem for over 2 weeks, it gets a little bit frustrating because you want to see an outcome. And really, at the end of the day, once that gem is complete, you actually really start looking to cut a small gem under 10 mil, just because you just want to get through different projects. And I don't know about any other gem cutter, but I find once I get bogged down in a project and it takes over a month to facet a gem, you're really just dying to get onto the next project. This one here, I just haven't been doing a lot of cutting in the last week. I've been doing a lot of gardening, being at home during this time, just getting other stuff done. So cutting hasn't been a high priority. But this gem here, I'll measure it because it's going to be, this is a 15 millimeter gem. So by the time I do it's going to be a 15 millimeter gem. And that to me, even though it's a competition gem, where the competition stipulations are, it's got to be 8 millimeters or more. This to me is just too big a gem for my liking. The good thing about this gem is because it is a competition gem, it's going to require a slightly thicker girdle outline, which is easier, less challenging. But to be honest, this to me, I don't like cutting these huge gems that are over 10 mil these days. I've been through that and done my apprenticeship in that. If you see some of my earlier videos when you're cutting gems over 300 carats, big whopping gems, you kind of feel at a certain point of life that you want to actually get into projects and get through them. I have a lot of designs that I've currently want to get into. I have the Ramsey's eye. I haven't showed you any, that no one knows what this design is, but it's a take on the Pharaoh's eye. So I've got Ramsey's eye. Some of you guys ended up getting, because you're patrons, you got a simple version of the Cleopatra's eye, and what I believe will be a stunning gem is Tutankhamun's eye. So hopefully maybe John can have a go at that one, because the way I'm going with this particular gem at the moment, there is no way I'm going to get onto the Tutankhamun's eye for another month or two, the way things are going. We're just looking at some of the other questions. So Joshua says, I'll have to send you some Queensland chrysoprase. Yeah. I tell you, I've looked at some of the chrysoprase. Oh, isn't it so nice, from Maryborough? And that green chrysoprase really is an outstanding gem material. It's actually getting hard to get. I'm not sure that site where the chrysoprase is in Maryborough if that is, can people still get access to that, or has that been taken over by Chinese consortium? I've heard it's very hard to sort of get on that site. So we've got 15 mil. Just reading questions. Sorry. Okay, so yeah, a few comments. Yes, I agree. The Cleopatra's Eye. I have to admit, the Cleopatra's Eye. I cannot think of any other gem so far that has been a better looking gem. I've got it behind me in a little capsule, and I compare those to everything I've faceted, and I've got hundreds of gems that I've cut in boxes, and I look at that design, and it for me is just an absolute world beater of a design. And if it was faceted, in a material that's got a high refractive index, it is just a world beater gem. It's just so outstanding. I've got to get it set in a pendant for my wife. I'm not sure where I'd be doing it too many times in my life, because seriously, to cut the Cleopatra's Eye, I had 10 pages of notes, because when you get into the crown, there's so many different tiers, and I had to float multiple facets, even though you've got the design, and whether it's my machine is not as accurate on the rotation. But yeah, I did have to float quite a few facets, and I had to write notes, mainly polishing notes for those facets. So I was at the right cheating angle. I think anyone who understands how to cheat properly, or can understand how to float in a facet, they won't have a problem. I know some of my subscribers have already cut it. Martin has. So this design is very doable, but it's not for a beginner. And I'm hoping that some of you guys, like John, maybe you'll get around to it. It'll be a good test on your machine. Looking at some of the forums, I've noticed that other people have got up to the pavilion, and that's the end of it. I haven't seen the crown cut. So what's happened? They have not got around to finishing the crown because they've had issues. I suspect that it just didn't turn out with fastening the table coming out the right way as it should, which is fair enough, because I had that problem once myself when the angles weren't the right angles. And probably at the time, I just didn't understand that I needed to float in so many facets. So anyone who's faceting the Cleopatra's Eye, have a go at it. It will certainly test out your machine. But I think if you can get it done, you'll find it's, in my opinion, I think it's the la creme of all the designs are faceted. If anything can outdo that particular design, or even the way it looks, I'd be very surprised. Well done to Bob Keller. And to be honest, I don't even think he's actually faceted that gem. I'm really, by the way you read into some of the footnotes in that design, it almost sounds like he's designed the gem, but I don't think he may have faceted it. A little bit like Fred Van Sant, he designed the Pharaoh's Eye, which in my opinion is one of the gems. And I hope John and Tam and all you guys, Josh, Laurelie, anyone else I missed, the Pharaoh's Eye by Van Sant, I don't believe most people have faceted that either. Actually, I may review that design, and I think there is an issue on the crown. Hey, but by all means, have a go at it. That's how you're going to learn a lot of really good faceting techniques, by trying designs that are almost unfacettable. Yeah, so John mentions that the Cleo's Eye it does have a round table. It truly has a round table. I've seen on YouTube, and I sent actually, I might have to send you that link too, John, for the simple version of the Cleopatra's Eye. The Cleopatra's Eye, in some of the YouTube videos, what they've done, they've skipped a few of the crown facets, quite a few, and they've done a simplified version where the table is actually an oval shape. Well, that's not right either. So I've actually created a design on a 60-point index wheel. It's got less facets, but you should get a round table. Haven't tested it out yet, so that might be another one I will have to try. Just reading some questions. Yeah, look, it was about 10 pages. Basically, it was this type of stuff here. And basically it was 10 pages of that, all different notes as I went along. Obviously, once I got through one page, you toss it out. You don't need that one page once you've done the polishing. But it really required, particularly on the crown, lots of notes. I would have to do that again. It's not like you can keep those same notes to cut another Cleopatra's eye, because everything on the crown relates to your pavilion angles. Sometimes you don't quite get the pavilion perfect, and the Cleopatra's eye does require that it has to be a very accurate pavilion. But you can imagine that the girdle outline could be out by 1/100th of a degree. So that affects all the angles surrounding the crown, which means you're going to have to float in facets. But look, that is very unusual that I would have to do so many notes. But yeah, definitely a lot of pages, and obviously I could have done it on 2 or 3 pages, but when you're writing notes that big, numbers that large, well, you're going to go through a bit of paper here and there. Particularly, I think Cleopatra's eye had well over 100 facets to that gem alone. It was just so many facets. The C8, C7 facets on the Cleopatra's eye were probably the most difficult. And as you start going towards the C8 facets, if anyone does try it, you'll begin to understand by the time, if you've got up to that stage, that is, you'll know whether you've actually cut an accurate stone or not, because those C8 facets to create that table will not work out if there's too much inaccuracy going on from your C1, C2, C3 facets, or if your pavilion facets are out of alignment. Are there any famous... Yeah, this is a question. No one's asked me this before, so it's good to get questions that I haven't been asked, because I've got to think off the top of my head. Are there any famous stones that you have plans to cut in the future that you have never attempted before? This is from Ian. Yes, there is. I mentioned before, there is one famous gem, and I've got to think of the name. The Pharaoh's Eye by Van Sant. I have attempted, but to be honest, that design is wrong. I want to try the Hope Diamond, but more so, this is one I do want to try, is the gem from the Titanic, the heart shape gem. I haven't tried that. Can't remember the name of the gem, but in the movie The Titanic, there was a specific heart-shaped gem, and I do want to try that. I actually have the design to that, but once again, that design, I'm going to have to go over it, because I don't think it's accurate enough. I think I'm going to have to go over some of the angles and some of the indexes to make sure. Yeah, Heart of the Ocean. Thank you, Ian. Gee, I should have known that. So that is a famous design, and I do want to have a go at that. A lot of subscribers have asked me, Cliff, can you facet the Heart of the Ocean? And someone's actually designed it, but it's something not quite right about the design. So I'm going to go over it and check it out one day. So that's a project I've been wanting to get onto. I'd love to do the Pharaoh's Eye by Van Sant. I don't think the crown is right at all. So I want to backtrack to John's question. He says, I have the complete works of Fred Van Sant. I'll look at his notes to see what he said about it. We'll let you know if I find some. Okay, well, that would be interesting to see what John comes up with. From what I understand of Fred Van Sant, so Fred, and this is going back a while. I haven't read for about 3 or 4 years ago. It's going back 3 or 4 years. I read about his biography. Van Sant was a well-known mathematician, American mathematician. I believe Fred never faceted stones. but he was really good at the mathematics of designing a gem. I think the Pharaoh's Eye, that recreation of the original Pharaoh's Eye, I don't think is right. I'm going to have to. That's my opinion. I have tried it, but this is going back many years ago. The pavilion you can get done, but I think once again there's an issue with the crown. So those people who have Gem Cut Studio, maybe it's a good time to check that out. So I think you've got Gem Cut Studio, so maybe you can tweak up some of those angles and send me the design. That would be good. Save me some time. But look, anyone who's fastening, this is a great chance for you ladies and men to try out some of these mythical designs like the Pharaoh's Eye. It's pretty much, oh gee, and I don't know. Look, the original Pharaoh's Eye, I don't think it can be faceted. I'm still trying to work out, just trying to get in my head some of the indexes. I can't work out some of the the C2, C3 indexes, but that make no sense at all. The original design, I think the original Pharaoh's Eye is a folly. It was put in a magazine, a journal, for people to try to facet, but it was really designed to fool people. It was just a folly. It's an uncuttable gem, probably always will be. So I think I've answered those questions. So the Heart of the Ocean is a world-famous gem. The Pharaoh's Eye by Van Sant, that definitely would be up there. The Cleopatra's Eye is well and truly up there. I've covered my bases on that, so that's been my bucket list. I think the Van Sant one would have to be another bucket list. I think those type of designs really take a high level of skill by anyone. The Heart of the Ocean design, it's not right, because what you've got to do with that gem, you literally may need to do a bit of freestyle to cut in a rounded facet. So on the edge of the disc, you're going to have to pull it off and cut where the points, well, where the top of the heart is. That's got to be cut out by hand and polished by hand, maybe with a Dremel. I've done that before, because original Heart of the Ocean has a hand cutaway. It has to be hand faceted, and you can run that on the edge of your faceting wheel here and cut out a notch, so you get a really nice shaped heart. How large would you want the final star? Look, Heart of the Ocean is a fairly large gem, and I think because there's so many intricate facets, I think it's got to be at least a 10 to 15 millimeter gem in size, but no bigger. I would probably cut it in a spinel, like a synthetic spinel, maybe synthetic sapphire. It's got to be blue for a start. So it's not likely to be real sapphire. So it's got to be done in some sort of synthetic material, maybe a tanzanite blue CZ, but I don't have any of that because it's way too expensive. So, yep, I'm just looking at the Radiant Eye of Zul. Yeah, Archive. Yeah, look, those people who've actually, this is a good topical question about some of the designs from Arkhaven, American facet designer. I think he uses the Ultratech. Actually, he's designed some really nice gems. I've cut a lot of his designs, I have to admit, and he's a good designer, but for some reason, some of his designs don't work out. I don't know. I'm 100% sure that if I ran some of them for a Gem Cut studio, there would be issues going on. Can anyone else, if you've cut some of his designs, really sounds like a really nice guy. I'd love to meet him. But I have a question mark on the accuracy of those designs, just because every time I've gone through the process of faceting the crown, there usually seems to be something out of whack And I know it. I know I haven't overcut. I know the pavilion's done. It's the pavilion on his gems are usually always spot on, but then on the rotation, for whatever reason, you got to cheat way too much. So I'm just wondering if anyone else has had issues with his designs. And when you have a look on the Gemology, what is it called, that Gemology site where you can get the designs from, a lot of his designs are still currently listed as untested. So really don't know. Be great to have a chat with him though. I'm not sure whether he actually does test his designs. Tam asks whether a concave fastening would work. Yeah, there's a little. Actually, I have to think about that. I reckon it would actually, but I'm not sure. I think it would have to. I don't know a lot about concave fastening. I've looked at a lot of videos and read up a fair bit on them, but you'd have to have a special attachment that cuts out that heart where the top of the heart is, and it bows in. So the heart bows in like that, and you've got to cut out that where the bow is. It's got to come in as a nice sort of a little. It's got to be cleaved in somehow, so both the top of the hearts meet. I really don't know, but I would assume that a concave machine could do that. But I think you'd have to almost do. I'd have to think you'd do it by hand, that part. Yeah, the Gemology project. So those of you who have been getting designs, Gemology project is a really good site, and I found that Voltolini, all his designs are really good. I've cut a lot of his designs from Voltolini, but the other guy, yeah, I've had a bit of just struggled. I actually try to avoid his designs, knowing that there's a real challenge ahead. So it sounds like no one else has had an issue with his designs. Yeah, I've cut. So Ian's asked you, have you ever cut some of the old style cuts? Yes, I have. Some of the miners, the miners cuts I have. I've done the squares. And some of the old, that's a good thing about the old style cuts. They are very reliable. They always work out well. So Tam's talking about, so you're talking about you've got a special attachment that you can put on your lees machine. Is that for concave cutting? And I might just continue on with a few of these facets for one moment, and then I'll finish up soon. So I'm going to work on index 61. Just to let you know, those people who have dropped in the last half hour, I've left the height adjuster on my mast as is for quite a while now, and really don't want any staircasing. I think that's the key to cutting a really perfect girdle outline, is once you've cut down to your lowest facet, which could be on whatever index, that's when you just don't touch it at all, and you just start cutting down by pressure. I like talking about some of the old cuts. I like some of the French cuts. They are really nice. The princess cuts are really nice faceting design also. So some of the old designs are really nice. There seems to be some of the old cuts seem to be like wine. If they're not in fashion, they don't get made anymore. They don't get faceted. So it's jewelry is often dictated by fashion. And I don't know who these critics are in the jewelry industry that they determine, whether a square is more popular than a round, because it does seem that squares are no longer fashionable in Australia. Like most of the designs are usually rounds and ovals, but you don't see a lot of square step cuts in jeweler shops. Most tend to be rounds and ovals. Squares tend to be, if a really good square cut, you have to have quite a bit of rough material, in my opinion. There's absolutely 0 point to having a square faceted. It's got a shallow pavilion. It's just going to look like a block of ice. Just won't look very good at all. There's a lot more leeway with rounds and ovals, particularly ovals, cutting them shallower. Squares and rectangles don't lend themselves to being cut at a very shallow angle at all. Just looking at what I should facet next. I've got to facet. That's done. Just trying to work out my next angle. That's a bit odd. So I'll go through. Freeze done. It's not touching. Now that's a thing. If that's just barely touching, I can just feel it lightly touching. So that's cut to depth. 29. I think that might be the angle I'm going to have a look at. That's fine. 35. That's good. 61. I reckon it'll be 61 and 67. 61 is good. So just going around. So index 67. And you probably noticed that as I've gone around, I'm just feeling where the facets are touching the disc. And as you go around and you're feeling where it's just grazing, some will feel like they're gripping a bit more or they're just touching the disc a little bit more. Those facets that tend to feel like that, you will need to cut even a bit more down by pressure. Yeah, I'm looking at some of these comments. Hexagons have become popular, and you know what? That is the type of gem. I don't like hex-shaped designs. I find that 8 sides on a round looks really odd. That's my opinion. I love it. A lot of people love them. Okay, see you, Tam. Catch you later. Yeah, I'll be finishing up soon. Once this facet's done, I'm just reading some of these comments. Most of the people in my gem club who facet, they are of the same opinion with hex designs. None of us like them. Oh, sorry, hex. Sorry, 6. Well, 6-sided. Well, I don't like 8-sided gems either. Octagon, sorry. So the 6-sided gem, sorry, Luke, the hex, you're right. Both the octagon shapes, but the hex is worse. The 6-sided is horrible. They look way too elongated, those 6 facets. Sorry, mate. Yeah, but the octagon shapes are not very nice either. Like the standard round brilliant's got, the 16 sides. 16's just nicer, finer facets. But actually, I'll have a look around for the hex shapes in jewelry shops because I don't look often in jewelry shops at the shapes. I do know the squares aren't that popular as they used to be. Sorry, yeah, hex 6. Have a look at some of the designs with the 8-sided rounds. It just seems, and with the hex shapes, have a look at how spread out those facets look on the girdle, how elongated they look, and it just doesn't look quite right. not enough facets on the outline for whatever reason. The one I'm fastening at the moment has, I'm just counting in, this has 9 sides to it. But when it comes to rounds, when you start minimalizing the amount of facets, yeah, it just doesn't seem right. It's taking forever to facet. Anyway, if there's anyone that's got any more questions, feel free to ask, and I'll try to answer those. And I'll just keep an eye on what's scrolling down. Have you ever cut a stone in a pyramid shape? No, I haven't. We were talking about that. One of the chaps in my fastening group has actually come up with a trillion pavilion shape. He was talking about the fact that there's not a trillion around that's pyramid shaped. No, I haven't done that. Yeah, look, when it comes to hex or octagonal rounds, I'm looking at Luke's question. It is a matter of taste. It really is. I'm not a fan of them. You probably look through my videos, you won't see too many hex or octagonal gems that are faceted. Well, the thing with a pyramid shape, if you do cut a pyramid shape gem, you're dealing with a lot of sharp corners on the girdle. It's almost something you'd have to be careful with chipping, because it would chip easy on those corners. Is it a gem you could really have set later on? Probably not. It's a showpiece gem, but it's probably worth having a look at. What would look really awesome is a pyramid shape on the pavilion, and then on the crown create an eye within the crown. I think that'd look really spectacular. Goes with that Egyptian theme too, doesn't it? So check a pyramid. I might. Well, that's got me intrigued. I'm going to look around for pyramid-shaped gem designs. Kind of don't see them a lot. Now I'm cutting, almost getting down to depth now. That's taken a while. But these are large facets I'm dealing with. So this is a 15mm gem. So you can just see the time. If I used a coarser grade disc like 100, I'd be getting so many chips on it. Then I've got to cut even more. And that's something I want to avoid. Okay, well, I'll look up that tri-illusional. Do you know who designed that gem, Luke? The designer? The Aussie fastener? Okay, well, I'll leave it at that. Okay, I'll check up. If there's any last questions, I'll be finishing up. For those people who want to join my Patreon, thank you. For those people who already have, I really appreciate your support. I'll probably make another video next week and send out some designs for those people. Hi, Dean. Well, you certainly have come in late because we're going to be finishing up soon. Yeah, I hope you're safe too, mate. You'll probably have to go through the live stream. So if you've got any questions, Dean, please ask, because I'll be finishing up soon. I've been going for over 2 hours, 2.5 hours. Yep. So with people, obviously in the US, you're doing a lot tougher than we are in Australia. Hopefully we don't get to the extent of what's happening overseas. You just don't know really what's going to happen in our winter. You just have no idea. Okay. Okay, so it looks like there's no more questions. So for all you people out there, wherever you live, stay safe during this time. I'll have a few more live streams. I could probably set a time for a live stream in the community tab, but there's so many different time zones. I'm not really sure whether people would pay attention to that. I really would like to do a live stream that would accommodate people in Europe. It's been pretty hard just because of the time difference between Australia and Europe in general. It's pretty late there. If I start at 6 or 7 in the morning, it's already getting late there at night. So it's out, from my perspective, doing a live stream in the mornings sort of suits people in the US, but I will try to do something for the people in Europe. I've just got to find the right time. Probably means it's going to be sometime at night so they can get to see a live stream. So that looks like there's no more questions. So I'll be heading off. So once again, take care, and I'll see you again, hopefully in the next live stream. Once this gem is complete, I'll be posting a video on the outcome of that, if there is an outcome. You never know when you're fastening. Anything can happen. So the worst thing that can happen, I guess, is that it comes off the dot. So till next time, see you later, everybody. Take care, look after yourselves, and bye for now.